Hello, my dear friends. Come, sit with me. I have a story to tell you today that will remind you of something very important. Never judge a book by its cover, and never underestimate the quiet ones. This is a story about Eleanor, a kind-hearted woman who endured years of cruelty, only to have the last laugh in the most unexpected way. So grab your tea, get comfortable, and let me tell you what happened. Eleanor was nervous as she stood outside the grand mansion, rain dripping from her worn coat. It was her first time meeting Robert's family, and she wanted to make a good impression. Robert, her boyfriend of 2 years, had finally invited her to his mother's birthday celebration. "Don't worry," Robert had told her that morning, "my mother will love you." But as Eleanor rang the doorbell, clutching a homemade apple pie she'd spent hours perfecting, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. The door swung open, and there stood Victoria Ashford, Robert's mother. Diamonds dripped from her ears and neck. Her designer dress probably cost more than Eleanor's entire year's rent. Victoria's eyes swept over Eleanor from head to toe, and her lip curled in disgust. "You must be the girl," Victoria said coldly, not even using Eleanor's name. "Yes, Mrs. Ashford, I'm Eleanor. It's such an honor to finally meet you. I brought this pie. It's my grandmother's recipe." Victoria cut her off with a sharp laugh. "How quaint. Well, don't just stand there dripping on my marble floors. The servants' entrance is around back." Eleanor's cheeks burned. "I'm sorry, I thought—" "You thought what? That you'd waltz in through the front door like you belong here?" Victoria's voice was ice. "My son may be going through some phase with you, but let me make one thing clear. You are not part of this family." Robert appeared behind his mother. "Mom, please." "Robert, darling, your real guests are arriving. Perhaps your friend would be more comfortable waiting in the kitchen?" Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, but she held her head high. She dealt with cruel people before. She could handle this. The party was a nightmare. Victoria made sure Eleanor sat far from the main table, introduced her to guests as the help, and even suggested loudly that Eleanor should serve drinks, since she probably needs the practice for her future career. The final humiliation came when Victoria opened gifts. When she got to Eleanor's carefully wrapped pie, she didn't even open it. "Oh, look, everyone, the poor girl brought baked goods," Victoria announced, holding it up like a joke. "How adorable. She doesn't understand that we have chefs for this sort of thing." The room erupted in laughter. Eleanor ran to the bathroom, tears streaming down her face. But Robert found her. He held her close and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I love you, Eleanor. That's all that matters." And somehow, Eleanor believed him. Eleanor and Robert got married despite Victoria's protests. The wedding was small. Victoria refused to attend, calling it an embarrassment to the Ashford name. For 5 years, Eleanor endured Victoria's cruelty. She was uninvited from family holidays. Victoria told relatives Eleanor had scheduling conflicts. Her gifts were returned unopened every Christmas. Victoria hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Eleanor's humble background, then spread rumors at her country club. When Eleanor and Robert struggled financially, Robert's business startup had failed, Victoria offered to help, but only if Eleanor signed a document promising to never claim any Ashford inheritance. Eleanor refused. She worked 3 jobs to support them. She cleaned houses in the morning, waited tables at lunch, and did bookkeeping at night. She was exhausted, but proud. Victoria mocked her relentlessly. "Look at you, scrubbing toilets like the peasant you are. My son could have married Sophia Huntington, old money, class, breeding, but no, he chose you." Robert defended Eleanor when he could, but Victoria had a way of making him feel guilty, playing the sick mother card, the "you're my only son" card. The worst moment came at a family gathering where Victoria announced to everyone, "I've rewritten my will. Robert will inherit everything, the estate, the investments, the properties. But there's one condition. He must divorce this gold digger first." Eleanor stood up, trembling. "I never wanted your money, Victoria. I wanted your son's love. And I have that. That's more than you'll ever have. Love that's not bought or manipulated." Victoria's face turned purple with rage. Get out of my house." Eleanor left with dignity, Robert following behind her. That night, Robert held Eleanor and said, "I don't care about her money. I choose you. Always." 3 years later, on a cold Tuesday morning, Eleanor was folding laundry when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Ashford?" A professional male voice. "Yes? Who's calling?" "My name is Martin Pemberton. I'm an attorney with Pemberton, Hayes & Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Victoria Ashford." Eleanor's heart stopped. Is Victoria? "I'm afraid Mrs. Ashford passed away last night. Heart attack. It was sudden. I'm terribly sorry for your loss." Eleanor wasn't sure what she felt. Sadness? Relief? Guilt for feeling relieved? "Thank you for letting us know," Eleanor said quietly. "There's another matter," the lawyer continued. "You're named in the will. I need you and Robert to come to my office Friday at 2 p.m. for the reading." Eleanor nearly dropped the phone. "I'm in the will? There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Mrs. Ashford. Friday at 2 p.m. The address is—" Eleanor wrote it down in a daze. When Robert came home, she told him. He was equally shocked. "Maybe she had a change of heart at the end," Robert said hopefully. "Maybe she wanted to apologize." Eleanor wasn't so sure. Victoria had been cruel to the very end. Just last month, she'd sent Eleanor a letter saying she was a stain on the Ashford legacy. But still, they went to the lawyer's office that Friday. The law office was elegant, all dark wood and leather chairs. In the waiting room sat Victoria's sister Margot, her nephew Charles, and several other relatives Eleanor had never met. They all stared at Eleanor with the same disgusted look Victoria used to give her. "What's she doing here?" Margot hissed to Robert. Before he could answer, the lawyer appeared. "Please, everyone, come in." They filed into a conference room. Mr. Pemberton sat at the head of the table, a thick document before him. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here for the reading of Victoria Ashford's last will and testament dated 3 months ago." 3 months? Eleanor thought. Victoria had updated her will 3 months ago, while she was still viciously cruel to Eleanor? "I'll skip the legal preamble," Mr. Pemberton continued, "and get to the distribution of assets. The estate is valued at approximately $47 million, including properties, investments, and liquid assets." Margot leaned forward greedily. Charles smirked. "To my sister Margot," the lawyer read, "I leave my collection of pearls and the sum of $25,000. Margot's face fell. $25,000? That's it? "To my nephew Charles, I leave my vintage car collection and $50,000. Charles slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous." "To my son Robert," the lawyer continued, and everyone leaned in. Robert squeezed Eleanor's hand. "I leave my love and my disappointment. You chose a gold digger over your family. You chose poverty over prosperity. You chose her. Therefore, you receive nothing." The room gasped. Robert's face went pale. Eleanor felt sick. "And finally," Mr. Pemberton said, looking directly at Eleanor, "to Eleanor Ashford." The room was silent. "I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, all properties, all investments, all bank accounts, everything, approximately $46 million. The room exploded. "What? This is a joke. She can't do this." Eleanor couldn't breathe. She looked at Robert, who looked equally stunned. Mr. Pemberton raised his hand for silence. There's more. Mrs. Victoria Ashford left a letter to be read aloud. With your permission, Eleanor. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. The lawyer opened an envelope and began to read in Victoria's voice, words she'd written before her death. To Eleanor. For 8 years, I watched you. I tested you. I humiliated you, belittled you, and tried everything in my power to make you leave my son. Do you know why? Because every woman who came before you, Sophia, Catherine, Amanda, they all loved Robert's money. They loved the Ashford name. When I tested them with cruelty, they smiled and took it, eyes on the inheritance. When I offered them money to leave, they took it. But you were different. You never wanted my money. When I offered you a settlement to divorce Robert, you refused. When I cut Robert off financially, you worked 3 jobs to support him. When I mocked you at parties, you held your head high. I watched you love my son when he had nothing. I watched you choose him over comfort, over wealth, over an easy life. And I realized something. You were the only woman who ever loved him for him. I was wrong about you, Eleanor, and I was too proud, too stubborn to admit it while I was alive. This inheritance is not a gift, it's an apology. It's a recognition that you were the daughter I should have embraced, and instead I pushed away. Use this money to build the life you and Robert deserve, the life you would have built together anyway, with or without my fortune. And please, forgive a foolish old woman who finally learned what real love looks like. With regret and respect, Victoria Ashford. The room was silent except for Eleanor's quiet sobbing. Robert pulled her close. She knew, he whispered. All along, she knew. Margot stood up, furious. This is manipulation. I'm contesting this will. Mr. Pemberton looked at her calmly. Mrs. Victoria Ashford anticipated that. She had 3 independent psychiatric evaluations done in the weeks before her death, all confirming she was of sound mind. She also had this will witnessed by 6 different people, including a judge. I assure you, this will is ironclad. Charles stormed out. Margot followed, screaming about lawyers. When the room finally cleared, Eleanor looked at the lawyer. I don't understand. She was so cruel, every day for 8 years. Mr. Pemberton smiled gently. Mrs. Ashford came to me 3 months ago. She told me she'd been diagnosed with a heart condition. She knew her time was limited, and she said something I'll never forget. I spent 8 years testing Eleanor. She passed every test. Now I need to pass my final test, admitting I was wrong. Eleanor wiped her tears. What do we do now? Robert kissed her forehead. We live, Eleanor. We build that life she talked about, together. Eleanor and Robert used part of the inheritance to start a foundation for struggling families, offering interest-free loans, job training, and support. Eleanor named it the Victoria Ashford Second Chances Foundation. They kept Victoria's estate, but opened it twice a month for community events, turning the place that once symbolized cruelty into a place of welcome and warmth. And on the mantle, Eleanor placed a photo of Victoria with a simple note, "Thank you for teaching me that love is the only test that matters. You're forgiven."